Hello guys, this is Tapa Mwema and welcome to another session of chats about the economy. Last week we were having a very nice chat with Sophie. Unfortunately today is not here, she's not well. We are talking about unemployment in Botswana, but today I have a guest. I'm not alone. You can introduce yourself, madam.
Dumelang Baraitsu, standing before you is Iko Gracious Sililo. I stand here as an inquisitive young Botswana who's interested in politics, the economy, and everything that affects the youth. I don't represent any organization, even though I am affiliated with a number of them. And thank you so much for the invite.
You're welcome. All right, Igobeng, the new government came to power in November 2024. What do you make of them since they came to power?
I think it was such a monumental feat. Most Botswana would agree with me, given the way in which Botswana were receptive of that change of power. I mean, 58 years of one political party being in power was something that most people never imagined would happen. But that was a very welcome development. Everyone was ecstatic about it. But right now, it's important that we hit the ground running and address pertinent issues that affect the average Botswana, especially us as the youth. Things such as unemployment, marginalization in terms of access to opportunities, access to land, housing, the healthcare system, the education system, as we saw the results, Zabanaba BGCSE and JC, also addressing all the challenges that we're facing currently in our country.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Around February, we had the budget speech proposal. A number of things were mentioned. I think the previous regime had challenges when it comes to the budget speech, where people were, talking about how it's not inclusive. Right now, we had Mr. Ndaba Khaolatel, the vice president, announcing the proposal of the budget speech. And what do you make of it?
The 13th Parliament budget speech that was made by the Minister of Finance was something that I was keen on knowing about what trajectory are we facing as far as our economy is concerned. So it's very unfortunate that currently Botswana is facing a lot of economic constraints, given the fact that there's a diamond slump. Our diamonds aren't being bought at the same rate that they were years ago. But just a bit of context, right now we're in an economic recovery transitionary period where we are trying to address the deficits that we've experienced in the previous financial year. We're also grappling with the declining revenue that was generated, the persisting unemployment rates that I've mentioned before, and actually addressing things such as endemic corruption. It's very important that before we even look at economic growth strategies, we try to address the loopholes or the leakages owing to things such as money laundering and corruption. How do we target those things? We need to pool our efforts or channel our energy towards bolstering oversight institutions such as DCEC to ensure that they're able to hold people accountable, people in positions of power who got away with corruption. And it's also important that we look at what the budget entailed. For instance, they talked about how they're going to build an inclusive and deep economy through 4 phases, such as halting financial hemorrhaging, which is basically the leaks that I was talking about, and ensuring that there's stabilizing the economy before taking off, and then the initial steps for change during the transitionary period, as well as the final stage, which is basically building a new Botswana, the Botswana that we as average Botswana voted for. Now, just for a bit of context, we talked about one thing that the minister talked about was the global economy. He talked about how the economy currently is a bit unstable, it's a bit volatile, and how there are some consecutive shocks in the economy which will limit the growth potential of many countries across the globe. He talked about how in January 2025, the World Economic Outlook update by the International Monetary Fund talked about how there's an estimated global growth of 3.2% in spite of the shocks and the the risks that we're currently facing, and how in 2025 that will increase to 3.3. So basically increasing from 3.2% to 3.3 in 2025. He also talked about sub-Saharan Africa and how there was a growth in 2024 by 3.8%, and how that growth is expected to increase to 4.2% in 2025. Now, when we bring this back home in the domestic economy, he talked about how, like I said, there's a diamond market slump. Our diamonds aren't selling the way that they used to, and that there was a 3.2 economic growth in 2023. This was a decline from 5.5% from the previous year, which was 2022, due to the lower global demand for diamonds. I think right now our economy is primarily reliant on sectors such as the mining sector, and diamonds play an instrumental role in that. Now, with the rise of artificial diamonds, there's a lot of competition, and we need to be able to address the challenges that we face. But given the fact that they managed to renegotiate the deal with De Beers, I'm very hopeful that in this financial year that the diamond market might perform better than we are currently. And he has actually talked about how we need to address the decline in our economy by in diversifying the economy and looking to industries such as hemp production, like the use of hemp for industrial purposes, for medicinal purposes, and that's one thing that I look forward to in the future, as well as ensuring that people are able to partake in the economy at an optimal level. There's one thing that we talked about at the onset of this year, which was the minimum wage, right? There was a lot of controversy, there was a lot of discourse around it, which is very important, because it's something that we need to ensure that the youth primarily isn't exploited. I mean, with inflation, we're buying basic goods at higher prices. The market is very volatile right now, and if at all the wages are stagnant, it actually hampers economic growth. So that's what I have to say currently about the budget speech.
All right, thank you very much. You just said everything that I wanted to mention. In terms of the minimum wage, there are so many arguments regarding the minimum wage that it should be put into writing. It should be a policy, a law that says, you know what, you need to pay people 4,000 instead of just saying it out. Yes. So I don't know what you make of that. And then when you talk about minimizing wastage, there is the audit that is ongoing. But the president announced that around February, March, about the audit, which is something that I really, really wish it would bear us very good fruits. Yes. So you talked about the challenges that our country is facing. Ian Khama was faced with issue of the economic recession. We saw everything just going up. And then President Mokgweetsi Masisi, the previous president, was faced with COVID-19, the Ukraine war, the Israel war. Now, President Boko is faced with another one. Is faced with now the US. The US president is a very intentional man. He does what he does. Every morning when you wake up, you just pray, no, he didn't do anything this time. Yeah, right. Now, the US president introduced the tariffs. Africa is the hardest hit. We saw Lesotho going to 50%. We are at 37%, if not 38%. What do you make of this?
When I actually saw in the news outlets, like, it was widespread when the United States of America decided to impose retaliatory tariffs on our country, and ours are very high. It's currently at 57%, right? 57%. I think it's a development that is very, very shocking, but it's something that we should have put in safeguards to fight against, because we can't be reliant on certain economies, given the global market and how integrated it is and how volatile, like given the pandemic and different developments in the global market. I think it's something that we should have protected ourselves against and anticipated. In Botswana, I believe that we tend to be reactionary instead of being proactive. But it's something that I am very disheartened about. It's given the amount of challenges that we're facing in our country, having a retaliatory tariff of that magnitude, given that America is one of our markets, is very concerning, if I'm being frank. And I think it's important that Botswana actually looks towards strengthening ties with other countries within Africa. I believe that Africa is, it's a well-known fact. Africa has numerous natural resources that we need to focus on expanding in terms of value chain development. For instance, polishing and ensuring that we make industrial products from our diamonds, and expanding that value chain to ensure that the citizen benefits from diamond production at the maximum level. Now, looking at the retaliatory tariffs, it's actually going to make doing business very costly, given the fact that our exports are going to generate less revenue, given the fact that currently we're already facing a decline in diamond demand. How are we going to navigate this? I think the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is an opportunity that we need to utilize exponentially. I think it's about time that we overcome the trade barriers that exist and ensure that we stimulate economic growth within SADC, within Sub-Saharan Africa, and eventually the entire globe. It's very important that we look towards that direction in stimulating economic growth and prompting trade relations with our neighboring countries.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've seen so many countries are responding to the tariffs. Are you satisfied with our response? Have you responded with anything as a country?
Right now, the government is looking to renegotiate with the United States of America. They're trying to come up with a better strategy to buffer us. Back, like you mentioned, how other presidents had faced other challenges. For instance, we had a recession, I think it was in 2008, and we had numerous challenges trying to navigate that situation. Then we had COVID-19. I think, like I mentioned before, it's important to address leakages. With COVID-19, I believe that there were so many things that could have been buffered if we were well prepared. For instance, ensuring that there's research and development in that area, and ensuring that we have vaccines of our own, and also improving oversight institutions to ensure that procurement of PPE is done in a seamless way and in a way that people won't be able to misuse their power and benefit privately. In response to the tariffs, it's going to trickle down and have a lot of repercussions on our economy. It's going to increase our inflation. It's going to reduce purchasing power. It's going to strain trade relations between us and the United States. It's going to hinder economic diversification. It's going to lead to higher imports and lower exports, and basically harm industries like diamond mining in our country. So it's very important, like I mentioned, to ensure that we channel our efforts and direct our energy towards inter-African trade.
Right. Well said. I've read an article by Al Jazeera, the newspaper. They were saying there are certain products that the US would want to lay low in terms of tariffs, like your diamonds. They might not implement the tariffs on those. I'm not sure about the source. Yes. So the African Union also responded to the tariffs by the United States. One of the things they mentioned was countries should renegotiate with the United States. How do you think the African Union should, ensure that Africa is being treated fairly in these tariffs?
I think renegotiation is a welcome development, but still we need room for more improvement. We can't keep on being reliant on Western powers and being at the mercy. We can't keep on doing that. It's important for us as African countries to take a protectionist stance. Most of the natural resources come from Africa. We have one of the youngest populations in Africa. What we need is the political will to advance African interests first, rather than trying to just renegotiate. Of course, that could happen, but it's important that that's not our sole strategy, because renegotiation doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have a positive outcome. And if we do have a positive outcome, is it sustainable? How long are we going to keep on renegotiating and being at the graces of the Western powers? I think for the retaliatory tariffs, what Trump was basically trying to do was to protect the local industries of America and put his people first, to ensure that they don't have a lot of competition from other markets such as the Chinese market. I think we need to ensure that we put Africa first whenever it comes to such measures that are being put or placed against us.
All right. Lastly, still about Trump, he withdrew the US aid from African countries, and we saw a lot of repercussions due to that. We saw other offices in Botswana being closed down because the funding, he said immediately, you should stop. The funding stops immediately. So what impact does this have in our country?
Another challenge once again, the withdrawal of US aid. I think, like I mentioned before, it's important that we reduce our reliance. I mean, the US aid has been in place for decades now, right? And it was very important for us to just not be reactionary and put in measures in place so we can be more self-reliant. But some of the implications, the obvious one is job loss. I mean, in February, we saw like a nationwide closing of the developer voluntary testing and counseling centers, which is something that was absolutely heartbreaking, given how important those centers were in fighting against the scourge of HIV and AIDS. I think we had made wonderful improvements as far as fighting against HIV and AIDS, but with the withdrawal, it means that we're going to face a lot of challenges in fighting that new HIV infections. And one thing that we can do is to try and ensure that there is more contraception. I don't know, maybe we can have self-testing kits, even though there's some controversies on that, but maybe we should urge people to have safer sexual intercourse and everything, to ensure that people aren't reckless with their lives, given the fact that US aid has been pulled. It was very instrumental because it had a lot of humanitarian initiatives that helped to advance the sustainable development goals, such as eradicating poverty, for instance. And US aid actually supported a lot of NGOs and helped with funding and technical development, giving them that expertise, those training programs that helped human resource development in our country. So it's actually weakening institutional support. There's going to be job loss, humanitarian efforts in fighting against poverty and HIV and AIDS. It's such a drawback in all the work that we have put in over years, from the tenure of His Excellency Festus Mogae. Like, it's like we're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But like I said, it's about time that we become more self-sufficient and self-reliant when it comes to healthcare programs, ensuring that people have access to contraceptives, ensuring that NGOs have the support from government in raising funds and financial backing so they can employ people and advance initiatives that improve civil society and help us to reach our national development goals as well as attaining the SDGs. In Botswana, USAID was instrumental in alleviating the impact of the HIV pandemic, as I've mentioned, and was actually important in supporting economic growth and environmental campaigns to ensure that we fight against climate change. There was PEPFAR, which was introduced in 2003, for instance, which had about 1.1 billion pula, like the cumulative amounts that was invested in that program. And one thing that is important to note, however, is that it's not going to affect antiretroviral therapy, which is important. It's very important that people have access to that and to reduce the amount of HIV-related deaths.
Yeah. And one thing that I wanted to mention to add on the HIV initiatives is the DREAMS program. We saw the statistics from the World Health Organization and the Ministry of Health that AGYW, that's the adolescent girls and young women, have more infections, and they contribute more to the new HIV infections. So the DREAMS program was just trying to help young women and girls to know about safe sex, to know about where they can get contraceptives, right? Anyway, unfortunately this is the end of our program today. Tune in and please go and come alive on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Sure.
Goodbye, and thank you so much for having me today.